A couple of weeks ago, I released a video wherein I discussed a few community-driven issues that have recently pushed people away from the Elder Scrolls Online. I asked members of my community server to fill in a questionnaire on this matter. Those that filled out this form were required to include what kind of player they considered themselves to be, and of course, disclose what they believed the community could do to make the ESO experience better for them. I did my best to include answers in my video from gamers that embodied and adequately represented all of the different kinds of ESO players, from questers, market moguls, solo enjoyers, and score-pushing Andes, just to name a few. I did this in part as a means to allow viewers to be exposed to a plethora of different perspectives that have culminated from differing experiences, and to be able to offer up some advice to as many people as possible given all the recent chatter about people quitting ESO because of Update 35 and the state of the game. At the end of this video, I encouraged my viewers to answer the questions present in this questionnaire in the comments to keep this discussion going and see what else the community could do to make ESO a more inclusive and enjoyable game in the wake of one of the most divisive patches of all time. This video did better than most of my videos, and as a result, it reached audiences that differed from my core audience. This resulted in the comments section being flooded with all sorts of different ideas and perspectives that weren't present in that questionnaire. It was pretty neat to read through them all. Except for when it wasn't. A lot of the comments were quite unhinged, actually. One of the more prevalent issues that commenters brought to light that hadn't really been thoroughly represented in the forum and likewise video concerned the ESO dungeon experience, from a community perspective, of course. Now granted, what I'm about to discuss in this video doesn't affect everyone. Not everyone plays ESO to run dungeons, and even those that do run dungeons and subsequently end up experiencing what I'm about to discuss do not all necessarily take great offense by these actions or get all that affected by them. They do make for amusing stories to share with friends over Discord, for example. That being said, clearly, many people do struggle with the dungeon experience in ESO, so this video aims to shed some light on this notion, as well as give some advice to those that may find themselves in this camp of players. So what exactly is the problem here? In short, many commenters express dissatisfaction with the kinds of players they'd regularly run into upon queuing into dungeons, a fairly common activity for a lot of the player base. I found that with a lot of these comments, people suggested that they really disliked it when group members would run ahead and pull ads without the rest of the group, or when groups would speed through a dungeon entirely, neglecting to take into account the fact that others may prefer to progress through the dungeon at a slower pace, to complete a quest, or take in the story, or for some other roleplay and immersion purposes. These commenters also expressed their disdain for the concept of fake roles, wherein a player may queue into a dungeon as a role other than the one that they're spec'd out to be, such as a character that's technically spec'd to do DPS queuing in as a tank, as a means to avoid long queue times. Some players tend to dislike this notion because of the kinds of problems that may potentially arise from a 4-man squad that isn't technically spec'd in a traditional manner, with 1 healer, 1 tank, and 2 DPS. Sometimes the fake tank or fake healer may frequently die of death as a result of being inadequately equipped to do their role, resulting in a challenging dungeon experience. Or sometimes they may just speed through a dungeon, killing ads to their heart's content without the rest of the group present. Before we move on, it's worth noting that this fake role discourse has actually been problematic in the past, as sometimes players end up accusing others of being a fake role because they aren't performing up to par, when in reality, the player in question was actually just new or inexperienced or unknowingly using a bad build and doing a subpar job at their role, or all of these things. They perform badly not out of malice or ill intent, but just sheer inexperience, which isn't really a kind thing to point out and get mad at someone for. I found this quite ironic, considering that the group of players that throw the terms fake tank or fake healer around tend to be more casual ones that should, if anything, sympathize with other players that have strayed from meta or ideal builds and playstyles, whether intentional or not. But alas, the f do I know. On that note, many commenters also took the time to share with me some of the really unpleasant social interactions that they've had with dungeon pugs that have discouraged them from touching the dungeon queue ever again. And shit, I've been there, man, so my heart really went out to y'all that dealt with that. Now, this isn't some groundbreaking, unheard of issue. Dungeon etiquette has been debated for at least as long as I've been playing the game. It's been deliberated on countless forum and Reddit threads, content creators have weighed in on the matter, and yet we are still having this discussion. And this concept of an unfavorable random dungeon experience is not one that's exclusive to the casual player that's looking to take their time in a dungeon either. I've seen plenty of Discord posts from seasoned PvE veterans complaining about really unpleasant PUG dungeon experiences as well, such as when the DPS of their group is too low to pass a DPS check mechanic, resulting in the group disbanding, or when the PUG tank gets game ended every 17.5 seconds because they're using a questionable build that they saw on YouTube from 2018. I mean, to be fair, that's kind of content, right? Like, these stories can be really funny to share, but at the same time, the experiences themselves can be quite irritating and cause for a lot of malding in the moment. So I wanted to offer up some ESO basement YouTuber tier words of wisdom in hopes that they may make your dungeon experiences in ESO a little more enjoyable. Now, I think the reason why we frequently observe complaints concerning the PUG dungeon experience come from the camp of players that err on the more casual side is because I think that the surefire solution isn't inherently casual by nature, and that's join a guild. Make friends that you enjoy playing with, form or join a community of like-minded individuals that enjoy experiencing ESO in a similar manner as yourself. The nature of the random dungeon queue is just that. It's random. It's not entirely reasonable to expect any one outcome over another because who you get in your group is entirely random, and there is no absolute right way to run a dungeon. That notion is entirely subjective. It differs between players. Sometimes you end up with players that want the same experience as you do, and sometimes you don't. It is what it is. You can't expect the LFG tool to group you up with people that have the exact same interests as you, as ideal as that would be. But if you join a community of like-minded players, you can remove the element of randomness from your dungeon experience altogether, and choose to only play with gamers that play the same way you do. Even if you struggle to find that ideal PvE community, you'll find that guildies in general, regardless of the kind of guild that you're in, trading guild, role-playing guild, Argonian ERP guild, are much more willing to be patient and accommodating than the average PUG if you politely ask them to take into account your preferences when running a dungeon, such as if you'd like them to slow down a bit because you're doing the quest for that dungeon. But listen, I get it. The whole just join a guild five-head answer doesn't work for everyone. Some players consider themselves to be quite casual in the sense that they aren't really interested in committing to any communities, nor do they want to feel pressure to be social or attend events and what have you. They just want to play ESO casually. Oftentimes, this is a mentality that's derived from a lack of ability to commit so many hours to the game. And I totally get that. I've been playing Lord of the Rings online with what little free time I have just to try out something new, and I have absolutely zero interest in joining any kind of community there. I just don't have time for that. I'm busy managing one of my own in ESO.
Y'all wanna lay an egg? I have fucking 0 eggs. Fucking click fucking. I got one, that's all I care about. I did not collect enough eggs. I'm gonna say fuck you and say Chad.
I've been having a great time questing in Middle-earth with my IRL friendo, playing Farmer Simulator, and being a general menace to the Hobbit population. Raiding? Never heard of her. The nice thing about Lotro is that some of the dungeons, called instances, can scale to your level and party size, so you can effortlessly solo or duo them, no problemo. ESO dungeons just don't work this way. I'd be willing to wager that when they're created, the devs keep in mind that they are meant to be ran with 4 people, and usually in that typical 1 tank, 1 healer, 2 DPS formation. Although, of course, experienced players can stray from this formula. Unfortunately, if you don't have 3 other players that play the way you prefer that are available to run a dungeon with you, and you don't want to join a guild or a community that has an abundance of players that feel the same way, then I'm afraid you're just about out of luck. You'll have to use the group finder. If you're feeling up to the task, you could consider the possibility of soloing a dungeon. With the right gear and the proper understanding of mechanics, you may just be able to solo whatever dungeon you need to complete for gear or undaunted keys, on the normal difficulty at least. Or you could be like that crazy motherfucker lucked and just straight up get Vet DLC hard mode trifectas, SMH my shaking head. There are a lot of content creators that specifically specialize in making videos about soloing group content, who you may want to check out if you haven't already. The last concept that I wanted to touch on has to do with the social aspect of the PUG dungeon experience. Many players shared with me some of the really awful social experiences that they've had when using the dungeon queue to fill up a group for an R&D or a pledge. People have been berated for not doing enough damage or enough healing or holding aggro properly. Others have been insulted for being too slow or too fast or forgetting to read the hard mode scroll or reading the hard mode scroll, anything you can think of really. Not everyone has that level of self-awareness that's necessary when gambling and joining a pickup group, and sometimes people lash out at others when things don't go the way they prefer. Now this video isn't for those people. I know anything I'd say would fall on deaf ears. It's for those that have been scared off from using the dungeon finder tool after an unpleasant experience. I've been there. One of the first dungeons that I ever ran was Wayrest Sewers 1. I was around level 20, I had no CP, and I barely had more than a few hundred gold to my name. I know, cringe. As a result, I was wearing mismatching and unupgraded sets from Auridon, the zone that I had been questing in, and I didn't have a whole bunch of skills or passives to my name. So basically, my DPS was pretty shitty. You know, because I was like level 20. I queued up for a random normal dungeon for my daily chunky allotment of experience points, and I just so happened to be added to a group of some absolute two heads. I didn't quite grasp this at the time. They shitted and farted on my DPS in the group chat for half of the dungeon, and I got so embarrassed to hear that I wasn't performing up to their standards that I ended up leaving the dungeon halfway through it. I thought that maybe I had done something wrong, that I had queued up for something that I just wasn't meant to queue up for yet, that dungeons were for far more experienced players and not scrubs like me. I wouldn't set foot in another dungeon until I reached 300 CP, which back then was no small feat. And this was largely in part a result of being so scared that I'd run into another group of ass wipes that would roast me in the group chat again. But it was also because I had come to doubt myself and my skills as a DPS from that encounter. And I only gave dungeons another shot because I was basically dragged into one, kicking and screaming by a tank friend of mine who was adamant in getting me to stop being so scared about dungeons, who promised that I would do just fine. And I did. If it weren't for his patience and reassurance, who knows if I would still even be playing ESO, because after that, I really got into dungeons. Running them regularly is what held my interest in the game. I met some of my best gamer friendos progging dungeon challenger achievements for really rad skins and personalities, and I've had some of my best times in ESO playing with my dedicated 4-man at the time. These people also welcomed me into the raiding scene and gave me even more reasons to keep playing and strive to become a better player. Those moments have kept me playing and have played a part in inspiring me to try to foster my own community where others may have the same experiences. So why am I saying all this? Because I want to be the encouragement that you need to not give up on one part of the game just because you had a really bad experience with it. This goes for PvP too, eh? Yeah, there are assholes out there in every game, man, but don't let them ruin parts of the MMO experience for you. I know it's easier said than done, which is why I really want to drive home just how great joining a guild is if you plan on playing ESO fairly regularly and are interested in completing group content. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope that my ramblings have been able to provide some thoughtful commentary on the whole PUG dungeon dilemma, and I hope that you were able to take something away to help you have a better dungeon experience in ESO. I think that both the PvE and the PvP communities could really benefit from more players joining their ranks. So if you'd like to advertise your ESO guild in the comments, doesn't even necessarily have to be a PvE one, please do so that others can find their way to your communities. Alright, that's all for this video. Thank you all for watching and giving me a reason to continue making these videos, and thank you to my YouTube members for your additional support. Take it easy everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!